This program contains subject matter related to mental health and suicide. If you or anyone you know is in crisis, call or text 988 for free, 24/7, to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline.
We need to be able to talk to children in a way that they understand we're there for you. We're part of it. We're going to be your partner. We're going to be your supporter. We're going to be your mentor. We're going to try to advocate and navigate the system so that you can get the kind of attention that you need.
Hello, I'm Vic Armstrong, and welcome to Strong Talk, a podcast by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. On this program, I talk with guests about the challenges and solutions to making mental health care accessible to all. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If we want to improve access to mental health care, we can't just rely on organizations like AFSP. We also need leaders in our government to introduce legislation that addresses the roots of inequity. Well, today, I am honored to have just such a leader as my guest. She is the U.S. Representative for New Jersey's 12th Congressional District and a fierce champion for mental health equity, the incomparable Bonnie Watson Coleman. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us on Strong Talk.
Good to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me, Vic.
Absolutely. Now, Congresswoman, as I understand it, public service isn't just something that you picked up. It's in your blood, right? You're a second-generation legislator?
I am. Well, my father was a legislator on the state level and on the county level. And then I succeeded, not him directly, but I served on the state level, and now I'm on the federal level. So yeah, before that, I was in the executive branch of state government. So public service is what I am.
Did you ever consider doing anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to be two things. I first wanted to be an actor. And then I thought I wanted to be the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, what about now, sir? Have you given up on your acting career?
Yes.
So what would you say would be the most important lessons that you inherited from your father?
To be purposeful. To only do what I'm doing if I believe that that's my calling, and to recognize that my respect for people is what is going to be my motivation to ensure that those who need our resources, who need our help, get it. The government works for them. Mom and Dad always taught us, to whom much is given, much is required. And my family, I have three brothers, and my mother and father, we spent a lot of time. Every night, Mom made us come home for dinner. And there was always discussions about what's going on and what our responsibility is with whatever little we had or whatever bounty we had at any given time. We shared it.
Wow. Well, clearly public service is in your DNA. But when did you and how did you first become aware of the problems around mental health and suicide in our country?
Well, I used to get up in the morning and read my scripture and then look at my Facebook. And on my Facebook there was continuous stories about young Black youth. 5 years old, 11 years old, 17 years old, who had talked about, contemplated, did it, or attempted suicide. And so one day I came into the office and I said to my staff, I just keep reading this on my Facebook page every day, and I don't understand, is this something that is just put there, or is this really happening? Because if it's really happening, we may not be able to fix it, but we could doggone sure elevate the problem so that there could be discussion, attention, brought to it. And it was particularly focusing on Black youth. And I'm like, it really isn't something that we talked about much in our communities because, most of us are Christian and we're like, oh, Jesus got this. You got a problem? Talk to Jesus, he'll fix it. But,
Yeah.
That's not very realistic.
No, I know, and I know exactly where you're coming from. I was born and raised in rural North Carolina, son of a pastor, and
Okay.
so I know that narrative very well. But when you talk about 2019, so I know back in 2019, a report entitled "Ring the Alarm" was published. Can you tell us about your involvement in the report and the alarm it was bringing attention to?
So in 2019, I talked to Karen Bass, who was then the chairman of the Black Caucus. And I told her what I was reading and how I was so concerned that we may have a crisis that we're not addressing. So she and I got together and she appointed me to what was going to be an emergency caucus, an emergency task force that was going to be of limited duration because we don't want to go on and on and on and on, just talk about this. So about 17 members joined me in the task force. In addition, we found a work group because we knew that this is very specific subject matter we were taking on, and we needed people who worked in that space. So we had psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists, a teacher, and a social worker. One of the wonderful people that worked with us on our guide group when we were doing the hearings actually had a situation where her own son, who was in college at the time, who when he came home, he seemed fine, had actually died by suicide. And she was taken completely off guard because she did not see any distress in him. So it was a very serious work group. We had a series of hearings. We heard from students, we heard from providers, we heard from experts, we heard from people like Susan Taylor, who had organizations that she was working with, and we heard from Taraji P. Henson, who had a lot of interest in that whole field, and in fact had a foundation to address mental health issues in the minority community. We held hearings for several months. After we had the hearings, we kind of collected information, and the working group in particular, the experts, kind of put together their thoughts on what turned out to be the report that you referred to, Ringing the Alarm. And it was to address what we found out, address the gaps, and to make the recommendations. And so after we did that, we put a piece of legislation together called Pursuing Equity in Mental Health. And that legislation was in response to the report and the hearings that we had. So the legislation had $1 billion in it. It was to make sure that we had more people in the field working with our communities that looked like us. It was to support students who were in that behavioral field so that they could pursue their degrees. It was to work with the NIH, the Mental Health Association, Minority Health offices, to help them to understand what we had found, what was missing, and to share with them what we thought their obligation was, and to collaborate with them to ensure that there were more people who were competently compassionate and understanding of our communities and the uniqueness. There was resources in there to bring more mental health workers, social workers into schools, so that the behavior that you see in young children, that if you don't understand their history, if you don't understand their life, their lived experience, you think they're bad kids, disruptive, when they could be traumatized kids, responding to a whole host of things, from walking from their home to school, in their neighborhood and what they encountered. You didn't know what was in their home, poverty, all that kind of stuff. So that legislation was really quite comprehensive, and it put money into different pockets and different research pockets. And it also encouraged the folks that put out research grants to ensure that they had more people that looked like us, that had community relationships, that did research, and to take that research and then try to translate that research into best practices and programs of that nature.
Yeah, what you're saying is so important, because what you're talking about is the need to have resources that are culturally relevant and that relate to the lived experience of the communities you're trying to serve, and also those social drivers oftentimes that can impact mental well-being and can be some of the risk factors that can cause people to attempt suicide or have suicidal thinking. You mentioned that need for having more researchers who represent Black and brown communities, but also having more clinicians in the communities where people live, work, and play and worship that look like the communities they serve. Were there other significant findings to come out of the report?
Yeah, typically having a mental health issue was a stigma in our community. Mm-hmm. And so we had to help people to understand that having a mental health problem was no different than having a broken leg. You'd go to someone to set that leg. If it were broken, you need to deal with someone's going to help you to kind of figure out your behavior, figure out whether or not what's happening to you it's just physiological or psychological or what, but to understand and to have compassion. And we had to get over that stigma in our communities, the Black and brown communities in particular. And so we were looking to also engage clergy to be able to talk to their congregations, to get us comfortable with understanding that mental health is an issue of health, and it is nothing that we should ever be ashamed of.
I love that you mentioned clergy. And again, as a preacher's kid, that resonates with me. But it also resonates with me because we know statistically, people in the Black community are much more likely to go to a faith leader, a pastor, when they're experiencing crisis than they are to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even a clinical social worker. So making that connection in the community is so important, and having those trusted messengers in the community. And I will tell you, I remember when the report first came out, and as someone who works in the mental health space and who's specifically works in the health equity space, it has been foundational in a lot of my approach to how we address suicide, especially suicide as it pertains to the Black community. I was also fortunate enough to be a part of an event just in the last several weeks, one at NYU, where we talked about what has happened since the Ring the Alarm report was published. Can you talk a little bit about what has happened in the 6 years since that report was published? And, have we made progress?
A little, not enough. First of all, I do believe as a result of those hearings, there has been more discussion about mental health in many different platforms and many different committees, much more so than we had ever heard before. Pieces of the pursuing equity in mental health have been rolled into other larger bills that other members of jurisdiction have pushed forth and have passed. Things like the Minority Scholarship Scholars Program, some of the resources. We had good conversations with the NIH and the NIMH, and they were willing to work with us and to ensure that people who were evaluating grants and recommending them were more diverse than those who had been. And so I think that those kinds of things are happening. And, 988 was a part of that. But there's so much more. There's so much more, because if you make these services readily available in the communities, in the Boys and Girls Clubs, in the organizations of that ilk, we can, and in our schools, we can attack it at an earlier stage and help our children to grow and have a more healthy life. I mean, because first of all, suicide in general is like, 17th or so cause of death in this country, but it is much more than that when it relates to the Black community.
Yeah, and it's actually the 11th leading cause of death.
Yeah.
And in the Black community, for younger Black folks, I think it's age 15 to 24. So it's third leading cause of death. So it is a prevalent cause of death in the Black community.
Yeah, and from the time that we've collected the information, I mean, the increase has been like 150%, things of that nature, just outrageous disparity. And so, and there are a lot of, as you know, there are a lot of factors. I mean,
Right.
Poverty is one, living in certain community is one, dysfunction in the family is one, bullying is one, education systems where the teachers are so busy trying to deal with a myriad of things that they're not actually able to focus on or even recognize why someone's behavior is as it is, all impact whether or not our young people are having the best services and support that they need.
So important. Your bio actually states that your legislative work centers on the belief that in the United States of America, there's a floor below which we should never allow any child, any family, any person to fall. And I hear a lot of that in your passion for the work that you do. What does that mean specifically in regards to mental health, about creating that floor and having at a minimum that there should be a level that we don't allow people to fall below that baseline?
It's hard to disconnect it from the other sort of social determinants and economic determinants. Mm-hmm. For me, eliminating poverty is one. Recognizing that poverty is a policy choice, and that if we in the United States of America, the richest country in the world, that seems to have enough money to give billionaires more tax breaks, if we can't do something about it, nobody can. But we need to put more resources into dealing with just your lived experiences, your educational experiences, your family dynamic. Mm-hmm. If your parents have decent jobs and can take care of you, it's a good chance you got a pretty well functioning family unit. If your family is disrupted by poverty and violence and things of that nature, it affects you. If from walking from your home to your school, you experience a whole bunch of violence and drugs and things of that nature, all of that plays into you. And if you don't think that your life can be any different, then you start having low expectations of yourself. We have an obligation to put resources after school in programs and nonprofits, in the community, of course, and even helping our faith-based community to elevate our children's appreciation of themselves, understanding the value, who they are, from whence they come, and what they can be.
Absolutely. I absolutely love the fact that you not only talk about the challenge that we're facing, but you also talk about solutions, the ways that we can approach and reframe it, which is perfect for the conversation here, because I love to have folks on here that do bring not only the challenge, but the solutions. In fact, you just recently introduced a resolution to the House of Representatives whose aim is to recognize the continuing disparities in Black youth mental health access and treatment. And so can you talk about that a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about what those disparities are?
Well, I think we talk about, housing, education, employment, economic viability, family units, all of those things, bullying, dismissiveness in school, pushing children out, not understanding what they're doing. All those things impact a child and his or her development. So the resolution really was, look, hey, we've done this. We did this 6 years ago. We try to raise it every year in some way, shape, or form. We just want to remind you that crisis still exists. And these are some of the reasons that crisis exists. And Congress has a role. Mm-hmm. Congress needs to understand it and respect it and recognize that they are issues that can be addressed. And so, we've done that resolution. We've done another piece of legislation that looks at just establishing a research environment in which several different offices looking at youth and healthcare and mental health get together and look at the impact of the disparities and what that means in terms of mental health. Mental health is not going away. I mean,
Right.
COVID in some ways exposed it in a way that we hadn't experienced. We're still fighting the after effects of it, the effects of isolation. While it doesn't just affect children, of course, adults have it as well. But we are, we seem to find it easier to deal with adults and their healthcare needs. We need to be able to talk to children in a way that they understand we're there for you. We're part of it. We're going to be your partner. We're going to be your supporter. We're going to be your mentor. We're going to try to advocate for you wherever and advocate and navigate the system so that you can get the kind of attention that you need.
Advocate and navigate. I like that. I can remember, and I've been working in this field long enough to where I can remember being on Capitol Hill, advocating for mental health resources at a time when it seemed like you had to convince legislators that mental health was even an issue. It does not seem to be the case now. It seems to be front of mind for a lot of people. We don't always agree on the best approaches and how to allocate resources to change that, but at least it seems like the conversation has shifted. Are you seeing changes on the Hill in terms of a willingness to at least talk about mental health?
Well, I was more so before this new administration came in. I thought we were making some headway and that we would see more pieces of the Pursuing Equity and Mental Health bill actualized, even if it were actualized through different committees and committee chairs. So right now, I think there's just such chaos in Congress that people are so defensive and so unwilling to work with Democrats in particular to look at some of the issues that we think are so vitally important to the well-being of the communities that are least among us, that have the least and need the most, instead of this administration and this Congress seeming to think that those who have so much deserve so much more. And so this, while we still talk about it, and I certainly am, I'm on appropriations and budget. And so whenever I get a chance to talk about it in any of the markups of the different departments and programs and things, I raise it. And there are others who do that as well. I don't think that there's the commitment that we need anywhere near.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that there's so much more that we need in regards to understanding and breaking the stigma around mental health and suicide, but also allocating resources to the cause. Mm-hmm. But despite all these alarming trends that you see, is there anything that gives you hope? Hope that we're on the right path, hope that we can get on the right path if you don't see us being there at this time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at, we're having a discussion about this right now. And these discussions are taking places on other platforms, mm-hmm. and even in some of our committees. And we tend to get a little bit here and a little bit there in terms of resources into mental health programs, into some of the youth programs. Maybe they're not so much directed right at me and my community, the children, the youth in my community, Black and brown, but Black and brown children do get to benefit from it if they're in any of these programs or in any of these communities. So there is a willingness to do some things, but while we're retrenching, particularly in the education field, where we're talking about, collapsing schools and eliminating the Department of Education and consolidating programs and then eliminating programs that have to deal with civil rights and other kinds of rights, mm-hmm. That negatively impacts our ability to make bigger and bolder moves in this direction. But, I am a Christian, so I'm going to say that the God that's on the throne now is the same God that was on the throne before. Mm-hmm. Same God's going to be on the throne later, afterwards, and forever. And I pray every day that God directs my path and helps me to understand how to be helpful, because I just want to do my job well. And I want to do it in a way that people don't shy away from me because they don't like me, but that they're willing to listen to me because they know that Bonnie just wants to see this happen. It's not about anything else.
Well, Congresswoman, I can attest to your passion and energy around this subject. As I mentioned, I had a chance to be a part of the kind of the look back at the Ring the Alarm several weeks ago at an event that was inspired by you. I also had a chance, it's probably been about a year ago now, where I had a chance to join you in as I did a Let's Save Lives, an introduction to suicide prevention for Black and African American community. That you also hosted for your district. So I've had a chance to see up close and personal your passion for this work. So tell me, what's next? What other efforts do you have planned around this issue?
First, I need to help government stay open so that we can have the access to the resources. I think we have a lot of work to do. I need to sound the alarm for people in our community to make sure that the Department of Health and Human Services, under which all of these, NIH and other organizations are located, that it is science-based and that it is willing to engage in the kind of research necessary to find the best practices in this area as well as in other areas. And I think what comes next is that we continue to have these conversations. We continue to raise the issue with resolutions. We look for other pieces of legislation that get at a piece of the issue. Sometimes we can't get it all. Like I think that the Pursuing Equity bill is very comprehensive. Maybe it overwhelms people because of its comprehensiveness, but the elements of that bill addressed and supported and the resources associated with each of those elements would have a tremendous impact. And so we just have to keep raising the issue, fighting for the issue, advocating for the issue, and convincing those who work with us that this is important for not only children that look like me and brown children, but all children.
Absolutely.
All children. Because if this is the 11th cause of death in our country, and that we don't even know how that really breaks down because they didn't disaggregate all the information. So obviously it's affecting young white people, even economically well-off white young men and women. So come on, we've got to just recognize the environment in which we are living, the burdens of just seeing things all over the world that impact us and the way we process them. Everybody doesn't process external trauma the same way. In some situations, it impacts you very personally and places a burden on you mentally and emotionally on how to deal with it. Well, we need to be alert enough in our various institutions, from schools to churches to programs to whatever, to families. Our families need to understand that it's okay not to be okay.
Absolutely.
And that we need to find help. And finally, we need to put more resources into making sure that people who are brown and Black and other get into the field of behavioral health on some level, whether or not psychiatry, psychology, psychiatric social work, whatever. We need more diversity. And I know that that's a bad word for this administration, but they just need to know what country they're living in and who lives here. We need more diversity in those fields.
Well, Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman, thank you so much for your passion. Thank you for your servant leadership. Thank you for being an advocate for all people in this space of mental health and suicide prevention. And thank you for joining me today on Strong Talk. It has been a pleasure.
Hey, Vic, thanks for calling me a servant leader, because that's what I want to be.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I really appreciate having this conversation with you.
Well, I appreciate anytime I get to have a conversation with you, and today of all times, and especially as we are, we're seeing the suicide rates for our young Black and brown people go up. It's a conversation that we need to be having. So again, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to our audience. If you're not familiar, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, or AFSP, is America's leading suicide prevention organization and the largest private funder of suicide prevention research, with local chapters in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. AFSP offers education, law support, and advocacy programs and events nationwide, including the Out of the Darkness Walks. You can learn more about AFSP at afsp.org. If you or anyone you know is in distress, call or text 988 for free 24/7 to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Because you matter. Your life matters. Your pain matters. You are not alone. And that is Strong Talk.